Welcome, everybody, to Week 17 of the CFL Weekly Pickup Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. The CFL Weekly Pickup Show is brought to you by Replenishing Care Technologies, the future of sports medicine. To find out more about Replenishing Care and all their products, go to thegruelingtruth.net, click on the banner at the top of the page. I am your co-host for the CFL Weekly Pickup Show, Mike Goodpaster, and right now I want to welcome in my two esteemed co-hosts. First up, the lesser esteemed, Brian Schmidt. How you doing, Brian?
I don't feel lesser esteemed. I'm always honored to be here with both of you. So
yeah, but it's
always a good day.
I always like to make Robert giggle. So, and the more esteemed, now he's a proud Syracuse alumni because they sure gave it to Clemson for most of that game. Robert, four-time Grey Cup champion, Robert Drummond.
Yeah, they did. Don't worry, Brian. I don't think you're lesser esteemed. Also, I consider you my equal. So.
Yeah, but you got to admit it was funny.
Yeah, but I gotta tell you, there's nothing better than going back and watching old CFL games and watching Robert run and catch football out of the backfield. I have more fun watching him in Toronto than I can really say about anybody. So yeah, that's always a lot of fun.
The funny thing is, though, when I go back and watch old games like that, I have more fun watching pinball. I was just a big power back. Pinball was exciting all the place.
Yeah, pinball was bad, dude.
Yes, he was.
So we talk about the CFL, and Brian had a great question before we came on air, and we're going to touch on it here, is the CFL, we look at this, and every week it seems like somebody looks like they might be a contender, and a former contender plays like crap, like Edmonton this last week. Is this parity or is it mediocrity, Brian?
I'm going to vote for mediocrity. I've always felt that when the media starts using that term parity, that's a lot of times you need to look at it real quick because that's a media word for mediocrity. But you look at the league, Calgary is in that other plane, but. Yeah, you're talking about 7 teams that are anywhere from 9-5 to 6-7, and nobody is a clear-cut number 2. You could maybe right now put Saskatchewan there, but that's a thread because we've seen that. Every time we start to see somebody that looks like a number 2, immediately they lose. Winnipeg all of a sudden now looks like they've righted the ship, and a week from now we could be going, oh, yeah, that was fool's gold. I mean, it just seems like there's just a lot of mediocrity. There's just not teams that just jump out at you, but yet at the end of the day, Calgary is who they are, and they've lost the last 2 Grey Cups. So, yeah, I always feel like it's an interesting question just because I feel like there's just not really a lot of mediocrity. It's not like, we were talking, back in, Robert's time. I mean, there was just, you never felt like there was the mediocrity. There was, good teams.
And bad teams.
But you just didn't see this in the middle. So I don't know. I mean, what's your guys' thoughts on that?
My thoughts are to ask Robert a question. And Robert, my question is this. I think the NFL goes for parity, for the excitement to have everybody in. Do you think that it is more exciting to have parity like this, where all but 2 teams have a shot to make the playoffs going into the last month of the season? Or is it better to have a couple dominant teams that people can either love or hate?
I mean, it depends on the individual, I guess. I mean, I used to have a coach, Steve Barato, with me in Toronto. He used to always say, and even in BC also, 6 in one, half a dozen in another. It's pretty much the same thing. It depends. I mean, me personally, it's like Brian said. Back when I played with with Doug Flutie, we were the dominant team in the East. We were expected to win, but we went out there and there was no parity in it. We were the dominant team, and we went on to win the Grey Cups, Same thing even in Baltimore. It's like, we got to the Grey Cup and we won one, we lost that first one against BC, but we were the dominant team. And it just seems that, Calgary's problem is Calgary's, all right, on paper, they're the dominant team, but they're not winning the cups. Toronto won it one year. Ottawa the year before. So it's like, right, if you're going to carry that stigma of being the team that's supposed to be dominant, and carry yourselves, and be the league torch, you've got to win it, and they're not doing it. So that to me that smells a little bit mediocrity because as you said, at any given point there are 6, 7 teams that have a chance of making the playoff or within a game or two away from each other. So no team is establishing themselves as the dominant team to be able to go out there and be favored to win the Grey Cup. We sit here and say Calgary, but they haven't proven it from year in and year out.
Yeah, and the thing that strikes me with this is this. Calgary is clearly the best team. But
yes,
when I watch Calgary,
they're the best team.
Yeah, but when I watch Calgary, I don't see a team on a level, anywhere near the level of your Toronto teams or Warren Moon's Edmonton teams. So they're not even a great team, but they can dominate this time in the regular season, which tells me right there that it's mediocrity. Because even the team at the top, while they're the best team, they're not necessarily – I mean, Calgary goes out. They beat a lot of people easily, but there's a lot of close games in here. And those mediocre teams between second from Saskatchewan down to Edmonton or BC on any given day can give them all they can handle. And I think when we saw teams like those Eskimo teams in the late 70s, early 80s, Robert's Toronto teams, those are teams that very rarely played a close game, especially at this point in the season.
I completely agree. I mean, Calgary's just the best of a bunch of average teams, So you're absolutely right on that. I mean, even when I played in Toronto, I mean, even playing with, at one point we had 3 guys on the team that were leading for the MVP of the league. That's on one team. So we were down, and our defense was the number 1 team, in every category, in the CFL. So it was complete dominance. Calgary is not a dominant team. They're just the best team of a bunch of average teams.
So let's start off talking about the Calgary Stampeders, who advanced to the playoffs for a club record 14th straight season after a 38-16 home victory against the Toronto Argonauts on Friday night. And really, I don't think there's much to say about this other than what we normally say, which is Toronto lost Ricky Ray early in the season. I think Bethel Thompson-McLeod has done a better job than people would have thought he did. In the end, Calgary's just too much for teams like this, Robert.
It's Toronto just had a tough year. Losing Ricky Ray, is definitely going to hurt your organization. I think Bethel did a great job filling in. And just for what he had with him. But just Toronto. And I saw rumblings and I saw writings and social media today about Jim Pop, Entresness being in trouble as far as not riding the ship, the Argo ship. But at the end of the day, as I said before, earlier in the show, that Calgary is the best of a group of very, very average teams. And you know what? Toronto is the defending Grey Cup champions, but it just goes to show you, Calgary is a dominant team. It has been for years, but last year Toronto won the Grey Cup. So in the CFL, parity or mediocrity, it's tough to figure out. 6-1, half a dozen in the other.
And the thing that surprises me about Toronto is this, Brian. I think Bethel Thompson-McLeod has played pretty well for what people would have expected of him. I think the reason this team has really sunk is the lack of a running game, whether it's the offensive line or James Wilder Jr., just isn't what he was last year. I would lean towards it being the offensive line. But when you look at this team, I think the lack of the ability to run the ball is what sunk them this year. Yeah,
and it's funny that I know early on we really, we kept asking, what is going on with Wilder? But you're right. There's no running game, and that was something that was such a big deal last year. That using that running game, setting up the pass, being able to do that, and then they can't. They're so one dimensional, and they're not built to be one dimensional, and with that just causes them so much struggle, not offensively, but I know like even in this game, field position, they just they were not able to play the field position game because they can't control the football. A lot of 3 and out.
Yeah, and then we move on. We're going to talk about mediocrity. Last week we're talking about the BC Lions winning a great game over the Hamilton Tiger Cats. This week they go play at Tim Hortons Field, and it's 40-10. This was over from the start. I mean, it was 40-3 going to the fourth quarter, and then I think BC scored a touchdown on the Ticats JV. If this was a high school game, that's what it would have been. And when you look at this, Hamilton's another team that one week looks like they're a contender, one week they don't. But the thing that sticks out to me, Brian, is the BC Lions got beat 40-10 because Jonathan Jennings was 17 for 25, which doesn't sound bad, but 3 interceptions.
Yeah, another Jonathan Jennings a game where he can look good one week, and then all of a sudden the interception turnover bug hits. And this was a great example of why we on this show, I mean, we've never been really high on him, because he can give you 1 or 2 really good games, but you look at his body of work, how many games does he have 2 and 3 interceptions, or 2 interceptions and a fumble?
It seems like every other game.
Yeah, I mean, he's a turnover machine. So, and that's just the really hard part. For BC to win, they've got to be able to control the football, not turn the ball over. Really more so than a lot of teams. Some teams, like Edmonton, typically, not so much this week, but typically, even if Riley throws an interception or 2, he rarely does it. But when he does, they're able to overcome that because he does so many other things, and they can be so dynamic offensively. BC's not that. They're not dynamic offensively, so they've got to be able to not turn the ball over, control the football, and play the field position game, and clearly that didn't happen this week.
Yeah, and when you talk about dynamic offense, that was Hamilton this week. Jeremiah Masoli throws for almost 200 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. John White rushes 15 times for 108 yards. And, Robert, I think the big thing here is Brandon Banks has returned 9 receptions, 79 yards. And I think when you put Brandon Banks with Jeremiah Masoli, who I think overall has had a nice season, I think Hamilton is as big a threat as anybody right now.
Hamilton has always been a threat, but they have to understand that and get that in their head. I was surprised they lost to BC last week, but Masoli is, a calm, cool. He's not what I call Jennings. Jennings is what I consider a gambler, a chance taker, and it just doesn't work well for the quarterback position. I like Masoli. He as you say, the 3 touchdown passes. He plays within the realm of the game and does what quarterbacks are supposed to do. And regardless of getting beat last week, I think Hamilton is a team to reckon with, because they had been playing well up until losing last week. But they righted the ship. If I can use that term again, and they've got themselves into a position where they understand that they're a good team as long as you don't go out there. The one thing we always say in football is don't beat yourself. And I sit there and I watch Jennings and I'm like, young man, giving up 3 interceptions, you're beating yourself. You can't do that, but that's what gambling quarterbacks do.
Yeah, and that's why they usually don't win a whole lot of championships.
No, they don't.
Yeah, and when we talk about, teams that this week have turned it around, we've got to talk about the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, who stifled the Edmonton Eskimos 30-3. And the thing that's impressive here is they scored 20 points off of 7 turnovers. And this was at Edmonton, Robert, so I think it makes you take the game a little bit more seriously. This isn't Jonathan Jennings that, they put the smackdown on with 3 interceptions. This was Mike Riley with 2 interceptions. So Matt Nichols, 16 for 20, took care of the ball. Andrew Harris was solid running the ball. But with that defense, if it continues to play that way, as we always say, this team could be a threat in the playoffs.
I mean, and granted, I'm a running back, but I like Andrew Harris so much. He's such a durable, complementary back to go with Nichols. I was surprised, see Mike Riley throw, because he normally doesn't make mistakes, but this is Winnipeg has always been good, a very, very good team. I don't think they know it. They try and understand it, but, a lot of times they go out there and they try and feel themselves out. But if they ever were to assert themselves and, and go out there and play the great defense that they 7 turnovers, are you kidding me? That's a great defensive effort against one of the top tier quarterbacks, in the league. So if Winnipeg ever decided that they wanted to be dominant and go out there, and be the forefront in this league, they could. But it's up to them to mentally go out there and do it.
The way I take them, Brian, is this. I think that Winnipeg is a team that has to get up early. I think as a team, I hate to say this, but they're front runners. When things go well early, it kind of snowballs and they play great. When things start off slow, they have a really hard time recovering.
Yeah, and that's if you really look back with Winnipeg, even last year, with a couple exceptions, but for the most part, that's the way they were last year. Yes, there was the comeback against Montreal, but for the most part, I mean, they play out in front, and once they play out in front, they're able to control the game. If they have bad things happen early, then they do struggle.
Yeah, and now we go to the Saskatchewan Roughriders, who picked up their 6th win in 7 games, taking down the Montreal Alouettes 34-29. Johnny Manziel, I think, played well for the game, but his efforts for a comeback came up short. Zach Collaros threw for 394 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception in the win. The thing that stands out to me, though, is, as I said, they're 6-1 in their last 7 games. They went on the road. I know Montreal's not very good, but teams that are good, like Saskatchewan, if you want to do anything, you have to be overcome off nights, and they did that here, Brian.
Yeah, they really did, and Montreal did. They didn't play bad. Saskatchewan didn't play great. They had their struggles, but at the end of the day, this is one where very easily Saskatchewan could have lost this game, but they didn't. They did enough to win. And you're at a time in the season, any time in the season, but especially at this late stage where the best thing is just being able to win the football game, especially on the road. It doesn't matter if you win by 5 or 25. Win, get the win. Because at the name of the game is this. It really comes down to, did you get a W or did you get an L?
Yeah.
And that's the key to everything.
It's the old adage, get the win today, look good next week.
That's it, yeah.
Go ahead.
Sterling Sharp said, I saw an interview on NFL Day. He said, at my restaurant, we serve 2 things, W's and L's. And that's the truth. I mean, it's about winning. And I love him because, I mean, he's 100% right. It is about W's and L's. Anything else isn't what it's about.
All right, so Robert, what's your take on Trey Mason? Because the Rough Riders are going to have to be able to run the ball if they want to make a deep run in the playoffs. I think you got to have a little bit of a running threat to go with Zach Collaros. Do you think Trey Mason is the kind of guy that can give them that consistently through the playoffs?
I think he's capable. I mean, I really, really liked him when he was at Auburn. What a heck of a young running back at the time. Coming into the CFL. As a running back myself, it's about finding your niche, about finding, the wider field, and the lanes are a little bit different than, a collegiate and even professional football. So it's about getting used and getting comfortable, in your surroundings, and I think he's doing a good job of it. They're definitely going to need a ground game to be successful going forward. I mean, I go back and I look at the Grey Cups I played in and the Grey Cups past. It takes a ground game, to establish dominance. And by that I mean, it's like you can control the tempo of a game. You can control the physical, mental capacity of a game by just running the ball down someone's throat. It's a lot easier, when it's 2nd and 5 yards, 4 yards, 3 yards, as opposed to 2nd down, in 6, 7, 8, 9 yards. It's the running game really can set the tone for what you do on offense. Not just the game, the entire season. So that's, I'm thinking about it now. That's why I'm a little surprised at Toronto and what they got away from, but definitely Saskatchewan can definitely get into a situation where they can be more of a dominant team if they can get Mason going.
All right, that brings us to Friday night. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers will go to Ottawa to play the Red Blacks. This is a huge game. Winnipeg sits in 3rd place in the Western Division, or tied for 3rd with Edmonton at 7-7. Ottawa's in 1st, but they've got Hamilton at 7-7, a game and a half behind them. This is a huge game for both teams. Who do you like in this one, Robert?
Ooh. Where's the game at again?
Ottawa.
Oh, got to go with Ottawa.
Yeah, I'm going Ottawa too because they've been playing well for a few weeks, where Winnipeg's not as long. Brian?
They're so Jekyll and Hyde. Oh.
Yeah. Well, both teams are.
Both teams really are.
You can flip a coin on this one.
You're right.
Here's the thing: if both teams play to their potential, this has the makings of a great game.
Yeah.
Oh, I agree.
If one of these teams plays down as they have, then but who would be that team? You can flip a coin and still, it's crazy. I want to take Ottawa in this so bad. I'm going to take Winnipeg. Just something tells me that Winnipeg is going to win this game on the road. Just because I just feel like Ottawa, whenever they played well the last few weeks, but whenever it's in front of them to really take control, they don't do it.
No, they don't.
So I'm going to take Winnipeg in this. I'm going to be the different one on this one and go a different direction. So.
All right. Next up, Saturday, 7 o'clock Eastern Time, we got the Toronto Argonauts, whose season is over, at the BC Lions. The BC Lions are 6-7. They're in last place in the West, but that puts them only a game out of third place in the West. And when you look at this game, Brian, I think you have to go with BC just because it means a lot more to them, plus they're at home.
Yeah, you have to go with BC, but are any of us going to be surprised? I mean, that's what it comes down to. I'll take BC, but I'm not going to be surprised if Toronto wins.
All right. Robert, you agree?
I'm going to take BC, but the Jennings, I mean, as I said, this is a game where you just go out there and do what you know. Just do the things controlled to put yourself in position to win the playoffs. You're playing against a team that, and I can tell you this from a player standpoint, things of the nature. Toronto they have nothing to play for. These players are thinking to themselves, we're not in the playoff. I'm not getting myself injured for next year. I'm not going to go out there and hurt myself. It's about they're going to be and it stinks to say that, but they're going to be individual players right now. They don't want to get hurt. What are they playing for?
Right.
They're not going to the play. So if they want to be free agents and go sign with another team or have a chance to go someplace else, that's what these guys are thinking right now. That they're out of the playoff, which is sad to say, but it's the truth. And BC has a reason to play to get into the playoffs and move forward. So for BC, they should have a mindset of just going out there and not making mistakes and just going out there and doing running what they do in practice. But it'll be interesting to see what they do what they do in the game because, as I said before, Jennings is a gambler.
All right, next up, Calgary at Montreal. Everybody agrees Calgary is going to win. After that, we've got Edmonton at Saskatchewan. Edmonton at Saskatchewan, this is a big game. Saskatchewan's 9-5. They got a 2-game lead over Edmonton. Edmonton's on the borderline of dropping out of the playoffs. Brian, who do you got here?
Yeah, I'm going to take Saskatchewan. I think if there was a second best team in the league that you could kind of get behind and be there, I would pick Saskatchewan. And then being at home, I'm going to take Saskatchewan. But again, this is another one of those games that if Edmonton wins, I'm not going to be surprised.
All right, Robert?
Yeah, I'm going to take Saskatchewan also for the simple fact that Edmonton lost that game pretty big last week. And, just losing like that, a mindset sinks in is, holy smokes, we're not as good as we thought we were. But but Saskatchewan is a very, very good team, so I'm definitely taking Saskatchewan in this game. Actually pretty big.
All right. Mike Riley doesn't play 2 straight bad games very often, which worries me there. But
he normally doesn't, but he doesn't lose like this. He doesn't lose like 30-3 also.
Oh, we're talking about Saskatchewan. We know we don't have to convince me to pick them. I'm going with Saskatchewan. I think they win this one. So, Brian, any final words of wisdom?
Oh, don't really. I'm too tired to come up with any words of wisdom. Just looking forward to a big week. I'll leave the wisdom to Robert for this week.
All right, Robert, the wisdom's on you.
I mean, it's getting down now to the psychological part of the football season, to where now as teams are like like in society, or or even in animal society. A team wants to establish dominance. They want to pee on their plot of land and prove that they're the top dog. It's a psychological. It's not.
Come on,
It's
Robert.
true.
When we're talking about words of wisdom, you can't say so. You can't talk about peeing on something.
Well, I'm not talking about pee. I'm talking about like when dogs go out and pee in their yard. It's just to like mark their territory. It's about marking your territory right now and letting these teams know that going into the playoffs, this is the team you're going to face.
Right.
So that's what we did in Toronto. That's what I did in Baltimore. So this is a tough team you're going to face. So right now it's about establishing who you are going into the playoffs. So right now this is a big next few weeks for these young men to prove that they are the dominant team. So we'll find out a lot in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, we're getting to the point where every week now is kind of a pseudo playoff week, anyways, for half the games that are being played at least. But that's
ask yourself. What are Toronto players playing for? What, pride?
That is it. And pride don't pay the bills, Robert.
Pride does not allow you to sign with another team next year if you get injured. And that's what these guys are thinking.
Right now, though, I would think this. If you play it too safe, though, it may turn teams off of signing you, too, though.
But guys know they mastered the art of being able to do enough, but not enough to where they're going to get themselves hurt.
Yeah.
Trust me, I've seen it. I've seen it a lot.
Yeah, I was like that in high school. All right. Gotta be all right for the parties afterwards. So we're gonna wrap the show up. I want to remind everybody they can catch us every Wednesday night, 9 o'clock on the CFL Weekly Pick'em Show. So make sure you come back and join us next week. Remember, all of our shows, iHeartRadio, iTunes, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Brian Schmidt, Robert Drummond, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.